We have to recognize that this redistricting was done in response to the Supreme Court decision to weaken the civil rights law, the Voting Rights Act, which was put in place to protect African Americans' right to have representation. And right now, this is so awful what's happening in our country with all this gerrymandering on both sides. It's awful. It's terrible for our country because you create these safe Republican seats, these safe Democratic seats, and the general election doesn't matter because you're going to win anyway. You only have to worry about the primary, and everybody just panders to their base to win the primary, and that's dividing our country further. And so it's very much race involved. I can't stand the fact that you're splitting up Memphis into 3 different congressional districts. That's awful that you're cutting up communities like that. And that's happening in places throughout our country right now, and it's bad for America.
Are you?
Yeah, it's bad for America. So imagine a world to where our leaders are no longer looking towards race to determine how they're going to win their election. Because this is what's been going on in this country for a very long time, primarily since the civil rights era. But it all started primarily during the early stages of the Reconstruction era. How did it start? Well, first of all, the Republicans were in more support of emancipation after the Civil War, right? Just how we got birthright citizenship. But suddenly, with the Compromise of 1877, they turned their back on us. They turned their back on Black Americans and pretty much allowed the South to go back into doing what they did best, was to make an attempt to suppress Black Americans' ability to participate in the system. This is where you get Jim Crow. This is where you get black laws. It was the turning of the black of the Republican Party when they pretty much ended Reconstruction. So as you continue on, you begin to realize that this whole entire time, because we've been having this whole idea with regards to race and leadership, pandering towards the racists in leadership, whether it's for the white American vote or from the North or the South or for the Black American vote. You begin to see that racial gerrymandering has played such a part in this country to where, specifically since the Voting Rights Act, right, to where you're going to see the contemporary contest, right, is for policies and promises, such as criminal justice reform, either economic opportunities or health care. So when you see Bill Clinton with things, or Ronald Reagan with things like the war on drugs, Richard Nixon with like the war on drugs as it started, as it ramped up under Ronald Reagan, you can see that Bill Clinton necessarily turned his back on Black America as he did mass incarceration, right? And who do you see coming in at this point in time, seeing it as a business to do some human smuggling across the border? Mexico, the cartels. So since the 90s, you see that the black voter, or you see the Democratic Party begin to realign away from Black America and pretty much start to begin to align with Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans as these people begin to flood the border, and it ramps up even more in the 2000s, right? So it's been this contemporary contest to either suppress the black vote or support the black vote. How do they support the black vote? They go into community groups, church networks, right? So here's this fight between our leadership to either suppress it or gain it, suppress it or gain it, suppress it or gain it. So we got to be able to strip this away from our leadership, because they are being the drivers of race baiting in this country. And you can see that pretty much being on the Democratic side, but it's being played on both sides. When you hear things like law and order, that is a suppression of the black vote. How does this change from these earlier periods between until Obama? We're gonna go up until Obama, and we're gonna reach up until Donald Trump's new era, new term, right? Is that nationalism, and that as we begin to go into this age of AI and robotics, we cannot allow, we have to surface our identity a lot more as Americans, right? As a person who, as a country of morals and values. Because as we begin to lose half of the workforce, so for every one person that's here in this country, no, for every two people that's here in this country, one of those jobs is going to be taken away from the two. People are going to have a lot more time on their hands to do whatever they want. This is the purpose of AI. We're searching with the ability of AI right now for us to have the first billionaire with just one employee. That is coming very soon. You will have one employee and you be able to, because of AI, become a billionaire in this country. So as people begin to have more time on their hands, we have to build our moral system, our identity, and our values back up in this country. And we're not going to be able to do it with race baiting. We have to strip that away from our representatives.
Opposed to the gerrymandering efforts in New York as
I'm
well.
opposed
That got
to
rid
all,
of
I'm
three
opposed to all
Republican seats.
gerrymandering. I've always been opposed to gerrymandering. It's bad for the country to set up these seats like this. We should have independent redistricting. We should allow independents to vote. We should have open primaries. But this is being done in response to what took place in Texas. And there's going to continue to be this tit for tat. They'll do this, then we'll do that, then they'll do this, then we'll do that. And it's bad for America. And this is making it worse.
I think we also have to understand that Black Americans have faced barricade after barricade after barricade in front of them forever for voting. So to take a majority Black district like Memphis and split it up, pull it into three separate sections so it goes into rural Tennessee, if you aren't familiar with the state, they're taking a Black district and stretching it out so that the white voters overtake the Black voters in those three districts. That's deliberately trying to make one party have no representation. It is an abuse of power. We should say that. This is not just a Black voter problem, because if anyone thinks their vote should count, this is a problem.
It's a problem because what you don't have is you have too many people that wants to give Americans this short-term fix instead of thinking about the long term of what's good for the country. This is where the problem is, where if we wasn't doing this at first, if our leadership wasn't involved in this racial gerrymandering at first, there would be more focus on policy that actually works, that drives the trajectory on the country for us to be together. Instead, this types of policies, or this type of gerrymandering, has been continuously splitting us apart. And why you see the black voter or the Black Americans' rights being diluted when it comes to immigration, it comes to allowing people to cross the border, things like that. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing to allow people to cross the border, but you just got to recognize at the same time that people have not assimilated into this country to understand that we are an independent nation with a philosophy, that we are independents. We don't believe in socialism. So when they come over here with a handout, it is driving us more into a socialist ideology, when here we are, that's not the grounds upon which we stand upon. Why you think AI is so excited to be coming out right now? Because like I said, we're looking for right now the first billionaire who will be able to become a billionaire with just one employee. One employee. This is where AI is. So that streaks at independence. So you cannot necessarily be coming over here from this country just ready to have your hand out and just wanting the government to give you more, give you more, give you more, give you more, while we're driving the black community to be more dependent on government. That's wrong. And it's all based on how? This racial gerrymandering. If you would draw the policies so that in leadership, draw the policies just like Donald Trump is doing, draw the policies that make it seem like we're on a national agenda to where it doesn't matter what race you are. What matters is your hard work, your morals and your values and your passion for the country to make, for you to understand that this is a relationship that we're supposed to be in, and you, the people, have the power to dictate us instead of us giving you tokens so that we can be, so that the party will have the power. This token-based democracy that we have been having in this country, we'll have to stop. When it's particularly being pandered to certain demographics. Because, all people are willing to work for what they want to have. But if we giving them tokens and we're telling this party this is what they did to you, this was what they did to you, that is the fighting that has to stop between in this country when it comes to the fight for or the suppression of the black vote. When you take this racial gerrymandering out, and specifically people like the Democratic Party got to focus on policy for all Americans as we are being attacked from a global standpoint. Let's see how the changes begin to occur.
This is starting with black voters, but it'll carry on to all of us. The bottom line is Trump and the MAGA Republicans are losing. People are not happy with how they are running the country. So they are desperate to control the outcome of elections by stripping away their opponent's power piece by piece, particularly in the South where they have the most control. We need a national ban on gerrymandering. It doesn't matter what party we have. Any law that limits who can vote, how they can vote, if their vote is counted, is wrong. We need fair, non-partisan maps. Take a grid to the entire country if you have to. We shouldn't have what happened in Texas, in Florida, in Oklahoma, and yes, in California and Virginia. That should not be happening. It should be fair, and if you are someone that believes that your vote should count, you should be angry. You do not have to be a black American for this to happen, but you should be angry on behalf of black Americans that it's happening to them again.
Let me play an exchange that a Democratic state lawmaker had with a Republican about how they managed to carve up the black voters in the state in the way that they did.
So is that correct that the census data was the sole basis for drawing these lines from 2020?
Speaker Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it's my understanding the census was used to draft the map you have in front of you.
Chairman Clement.
Based on the population.
Okay, well, that's pretty interesting because census data doesn't include any partisan scores or partisan data. And your entire argument this entire week has been that this is about politics and partisanship. So if you solely relied on census data, I'm confused about how you knew partisan scores when drawing this map, if that wasn't even considered.
Speaker Zachary.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
It's stupid, right? And see how hard it is if you can draw up a partisan maps just based on how a specific demographic is going to vote if you don't use race when it comes to how to draw up congressional maps or districting maps. It's going to be very difficult. All you can rely on is what your last voter liked about your policies, what they consider. So it gives us, it reopens up the opportunity for us to talk to government and for the folks, for the government, right, our representatives to focus on what we're talking about. What it is that we need for us to be a country together. It's that the communication that is supposed to be happening. That is not going to be able to happen if we're just only simply racial gerrymandering. Because how are you going to determine who your next voter base is going to be? If it has to be from the policies. This is where the Democratic Party has been falling short. And this is where they're going to fall short because they only want to give out tokens. The type of tokens that it doesn't necessarily go into the fabric and the foundings of what this nation is, that drives us to be more of a socialist country, as they want to increase immigration. Let's give them this, give them that, give them this, give them that, in hopes that they vote for us, as we pander to them a lot more because we lost the black vote, the black American vote. When Clinton did the whole switch up in the 1990s, when he had the big crime bill, in order for them to regain power. So it's these types of switches, right? As you can see that Ronald Reagan had first initialized this, right, with the building up of prisons. And in that, with the whole idea of the first MAGA, was devastating to the black community. But it's all have to do with votes. Votes, 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 votes. If we take this racial gerrymandering out of the equation, we have to look more from the perspective of policy. You know what I'm saying? It's so important in so many different dynamics, right? That we got to be able to strip our representatives away from these type of tactics, which puts a line in between us, which have us fighting from an inward fight, to where we don't understand, pretty much what our government is supposed to be doing. They're going to have to sit down and tell us the policies, be truthful about the policies, tell us what they are doing policy-wise to drive this country forward, so that they can have the rights to be our representatives. I don't even want to say the rights for them to be in power. No, they have the rights to be our representatives because they sit down and was able to communicate it with us effectively without determining factors based on race.
He doesn't answer the question because it is a good question. Are they using just census data, or are they using race as a proxy for partisanship? And is that really, is that a smokescreen for carving up black voters?
You use proxies for partisanship based on socioeconomic factors, on income, on
race,
geography, on zip code.
On race?
I've frankly never seen that in any analyses that I've seen, though. Prior to the Cali decision, when there were redistricting efforts, they would look at that factor. They would look at race to figure out whether or not they're in compliance of Section 2 of the VRA. Now we're in a different world where we're not cabineting specific districts. Just like to state for the record, this is the guy who is currently representing that area.
So what?
But we had these independent redistricting commissions.
What's the point of pointing out that Steve Cohen as well?
My point, we have the same issue in Michigan where we have an independent redistricting commission, right? It's independent. There's always going to be politics in gerrymandering, regardless of how you try to dress it up with nonpartisan commissions. You can try to control for the partisanship, but you're never going to eliminate that element. But I will say that, the rich irony is that in both California and Virginia, they had independent redistricting commissions. They wanted to reform it, and then they cast off the shackles of the principles as soon as it was politically convenient.
Well, they asked the voters, unlike any of the other states that did not ask the voters.
Actually deceived the voters, depending on how
I'm actually
the
glad. Let's show the picture again. I'm glad that you brought up that he's a white representative that represents black districts, because guess what? They had the opportunity to choose. Mm-hmm. This is about taking away black Americans' opportunity to choose who they want to represent them. So whether that is white Representative Cohen, if that is Representative Pearson, who's black, who's running for that same district, who is, running against Cohen, the bottom line is it was set up, the Article 2 of the Voting Rights Act was set up to allow my community to have the choice, because so many choices have been taken away from us. And so when you take that away,
it is
when
a
you
little,
but that's the element we're going to focus on tonight.
Michigan. Let's look at Michigan's congressional delegation.
Yeah.
There were a number of VRA seats that were drawn to make sure they had the appropriate amount of African American voters, which, the assumption there is on the partisanship. Not a single one of them is represented by an African American representative.
And I got
only representative in Congress.
I have a problem with
You have to admit it's a little ironic that the woman now who is likely going to win the 9th district in Tennessee is a black Republican woman as a result of this redistricting effort. It's likely going to be a black Republican woman who beats that old white man.
And see, that's exactly why it's so important. Exactly why it's so important that we get rid of this racial gerrymandering, because it doesn't actually matter who the American is, as long as the American is able to set us on a path that us as Americans feel comfortable with. It doesn't matter what his race is, that that he or she is being an effective communicator and is following through on the policies we have voted him into office for, gives him the right to go ahead and say, okay, we want you to be a representative for us the next term. Because think of a business, right? You hire an individual, but they get nothing done. You hire an individual, everything sounds good, right? But when you hire that individual, he does a good, job to get him through that probationary period. But after that probationary period, you look at, well, how did this, for instance, salesperson drives more income into the business? Why isn't he just want to be a salesperson and he doesn't want to have it set up to where he begins to want to have managed an entire district of a sales force? You want them do-gooders, them hard workers that's going to be our representatives to actually follow through on the policies that is necessary for us to be a driving force in this country that push us forward, and it shouldn't be on the basis of race. So when you have this fighting, you're going to have things like felony disenfranchisement. You're going to have things like tough on crime. You're going to have things like the war on drugs. You're going to have things to where Black Americans is not getting supported in the community, depending on who's in office, to, push a value system for the country that you're going to try to suppress it by, defunding schools, defunding these type of programs to bring Black America, in an equal alignment with white America, for instance, in terms of economic mobility. If you get rid of this racial gerrymandering, and I don't see how necessarily they're going to use bipartisan gerrymandering. How's that being done? I need to do a lot more studying with that, right? But it's only because Democratic Party policy sucks so much that we have seen them for who they really are, that they are having a problem right now. We cannot allow them to continuously do this, especially when they are the ones who have historically done the most wrong towards the Black community, the Black American community.
Make the basic point that in the presidential election, Trump got 65%, Kamala Harris got 35%. So it's easy to assume that Tennessee is 35% Democratic. Of the current 9 seats, 1 seat is Democratic. If 35%, it would be 3 seats would be Democratic. Right now it's 1. Under this new redistricting, it'll be 9 Republican, 0 Democratic. That's just not right. And this is happening all over our country, and it's destroying our country.
Yeah,
Well, what do you expect to happen if the Democratic Party is looking more like a diplomatic party than a party that represents the United States, a political party? If they wants to, shut down our borders, defund the police, and it's not to say that, listen, so when you see the harassment of Black people, Black Americans in their communities, why do you think that harassment stems from? Right? It's from a cultural perspective of white supremacy, but why do you think leadership wants to, just get on the tide? And you see it with the crime bill. You see it with mass incarceration. You see it with the war on drugs. These are all signs and codes for suppression of the Black vote. If the Democratic Party would do a better job at policy, they wouldn't be having this problem. And this is why I say they have to if they want to stay in power, they have to, I don't want to say, if they want to continue to represent the United States, they must do a better job at policy, because look at California. Look at Chicago, right? Look at these places where these people have conjured up the majority. They're all belly up right now. All of them belly up. All these Democratic-run states, particularly the ones who have the majority, they like, it's a question is about, man, who gonna come fix this state? Because this state is horribly messed up.
I mean, Republicans were just complaining about this very thing in Virginia a couple weeks ago. And so now this is an even more extreme example of how, putting aside race for a second, just if you're a Democrat in the state, you have no shot of having a representative that has your interests in mind in Washington at this point.
Which is similar to many places in the Northeast. And I will say, I mean, I think the Tennessee move is in direct retaliation. And I'll say retaliation because Hakeem Jeffrey said it was maximum warfare. That's what he said after the Virginia redistricting.
He was responding to Trump redistricting Texas.
Right.
He
which was in
say
response
that.
to New
Why don't we
York.
just all agree?
Why don't we all agree? Yeah, let's
Why don't we
not
all
do
agree?
it.
We're all different
True.
viewpoints. Why don't we all agree this is wrong? Gerrymandering is wrong. Safe seats is hurting our country because people do not listen to the people when they're in safe seats. They just pander to their base, and that's killing our country. Let's all agree. Conservative, liberal, moderate,
Whatever
all of us,
I am.
whatever you guys are. Let's all agree this is wrong.
Agree. It's wrong.
And let's also agree that they won't
Lydia?
be changing it. And let's also agree it's time for tit for tat. I know you say you don't want tit for tat. I support tit for tat. If the
Well, this is the problem. We're not going to resolve anything.
Oh, no, it's okay. But you guys want to go there, so let's go there. Let's tit for tat. And with Representative Pearson, the energy that he brought today, and I put it out on my social media, everybody was loving it. They're not going to change it. So crying about it's not going to make a difference. California's going to make up the difference. Virginia's going to make up the difference. Organizing voters, Democrats need to flip the House and need to expand the Supreme Court because that's what this is about.
But where does this end?
It ends at the For the People's Act.
That's it.
What the Democrats tried to pass and all voted for that banned partisan gerrymandering. It ends where we make dark money out of politics. It ends when you put Democrats who already voted for the John Lewis Voter Rights Act back in power, and you actually pass those things that make voter election day a holiday, that give us mail-in ballots, that give us safety in voting. All the things the Republicans are currently trying to rip away. Voter suppression started with gerrymandering, and then closing polling stations, and then limiting drop boxes, and then mail-in voting, and early voting, and same-day registration. Those are all taking away from certain communities that vote Democratic. We have to stop doing that. And it ends when you put Democrats in charge and you actually pass the laws that they tried to pass before and all voted for and Republicans voted against.
It ends with
Simply put, all that what she said just said the Democratic Party need to stop race bait. You know, voter suppression. We should be out of this age of voter suppression. That's why you can't racially gerrymander no more. You know what I'm saying? Do I agree that the election day should be a holiday? Yes. We should come together and celebrate on a day that is so sensitive to the mechanisms of what makes this country function. It is the written system, right? If we vote something in, the Supreme Court can't say nothing, right? If we, as a people, vote something in, the Supreme Court has to look at it and see does it and how does it's affecting us, right, in a way to where it doesn't violate any of our prior rules, right? However, but once the people vote something in, just like California, as it begins to draw up this has an independent committee to draw up its district. One thing you can't take away from us is our right to vote. Everybody has an ID. Let's pass the SAVE Act. How about that? So we understand who has the right to vote in this country. And all this tit for tat stuff, I'm telling you, that's been the problem. Tit for tat, tit for tat. Okay, well, let's find a way to suppress their vote so we can be in office. All right, and it's going to be a lot more skewered in being able to be hitting on how you going to partisan gerrymander if you ain't coming to You know what I'm saying? If you're not coming with the right policies, and the Democratic Party has not been coming with the right policies, you know what I'm saying? It's all this short fix so we can be able to gain power instead of having a track record to where you're going to lead the country into the way that is best for the American people. This is the fight right now. The fight right now is that we need this type of decision as we are going into this AI age. Because this AI age, people are going to be more in search for identity. And because of people are going to be less likely to have jobs, and more jobs have to be created, and figure out on how that is all going to play out, our morals and our values have to come together as a country first. And we cannot continue to be race baiting when it comes to a contest that is putting United States citizen against United States citizen. My next fear is that what it's going to become with, okay, if we can't use racial gerrymandering, then we're going to go back to what is actually in the background, and that is, wealthy versus the poor. Rich versus poor. Rich versus poor. Right? Because that's going to be the next play, in which we're not going to be able to see. That it may take time, but if you, in this new AI age, because I've been afraid with regards to socialism, because I'm afraid of AI being able to take over our government and, kind of act like this communist regime on America. AI is going to be very, very, put us on a need for some form of socialism. But then if you use it in the correct form, then AI can be a brilliant thing that enhances our independence at the same time. And what do I mean by that? Like I said from the jump, we're now looking for that first billionaire who becomes a billionaire with just one employee. Listen, the Democratic Party has done all this stuff to themselves. And I don't feel sorry for them, because I don't like racist people. And they've been a driving force. Both of this tit for tat stuff has been a driving force to continued racism in this country. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on a Trumped Up Live show, man. Always remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It's a good day to be a soldier.